Yes, people, it is Chris from Third Eye Fitness. It is -3 in Galway City Gym today, and today I'm going to be running you through my favorite pull workout that you can do in practically 90% of all gyms. As you can see, this gym is not one of those gyms where we have 40 different machines to train your fucking arse cheeks. We simply have 4 walls and a fuckload of iron. So let's get into it. We start off our workouts with a general warm-up. Now, a general warm-up is simply a low-intensity, steady-state form of cardio. The idea isn't to get a sweat on. The idea isn't to go hell for leather or use this as a form of cardiovascular work. It is simply just to get the body up to working temperature so that when we do hit the weights, the body's ready to perform. Now, the reason I still incorporate a general warm-up into my resistance training days is because usually I'm training first thing in the morning, or I've been stuck in traffic for a long period of time before I actually get to the gym, meaning my body is in a state of rest. My heart rate's fairly low, my body temperature is relatively low. So the idea of a general warm-up is to slowly increase the body to a working state so that when I do go ahead and hit the weights, my body's a little bit more prepped for the intensity that's about to ensue. I then spend about 3 to 5 minutes in what we call a specific warm-up. Now, a specific warm-up is exactly what it says on the tin. It specifically warms up the target areas we're about to use out on the gym floor. Now, I'm not going to bore you to death with my chosen exercises and stretches. However, this is an excellent time to focus on those niggles and tweaks that you have on the body, or if you just care about injury prevention overall, this is the time to do so. Now, we get to the meat and spuds of this. I start off my pull days with 2 warm-up sets and 3 working sets on the close grip pull down. Of all the warm-ups we've done so far, the best way to warm up for this specific exercise is simply to do this specific exercise at a much lighter weight. A usual rule of thumb when we talk about warm-up sets is to take your working set weight and cut that in half. That's going to give you a decent enough resistance to allow yourself to warm up throughout this exercise without it taxing your working sets. It's also an excellent way to get blood flowing into those target areas. When we talk about the close grip pull down, right, there's only a couple of things that I want you to remember when performing this exercise. So first and foremost, I'm going to have Dean here have a slight lean back. This is going to allow us to get a full contraction through the lats. From here, he's going to pull down to the top of the chest, but the big thing is he's going to focus about sticking his elbow into his pocket. That's going to give him that peak contraction down at the bottom. He's going to hold for only 1 second, but the big one on this is he's going to release it back up to his starting position for a 3, 2, 1, making sure that we get that full stretch on the arm and getting that full stretch through the lats as well. Down for 1 and a release for 3, 2, 1, and set, Dean. Good stuff. So you might be asking yourself why we had a 3-second release on the way up, and I'll tell you exactly why. Most people end up with a down for 1 and a release for 1, and that gives you a time under tension of only 2 seconds. And while this isn't actually flawed, we can actually squeeze a little bit more juice out of every single rep. By manipulating the eccentric or the stretching portion of the rep, we can actually increase the time under tension by an extra 2 seconds. So rather than coming down for a second and up for a second, meaning your total time under tension is 2 seconds, we've actually doubled the time under tension to a total of 4 seconds with a 1 second concentric and a 3 second eccentric. And again, this just allows you to squeeze a little bit more juice out of every single rep. I then move on to arguably the hardest exercise known to man, and that is the wide grip pull-ups. A compound exercise primarily focusing on the back with a secondary movement of those biceps once again. The only cues I want you to be mindful when performing this exercise are when we're approaching the bar, you want those hand positions to be slightly outside shoulders width. As well as that, I want you to lean back slightly when performing this exercise and think about pulling your chest up to the bar rather than the classic just getting that chin over the bar. This is going to allow those lats to activate slightly more so, and on top of that as well, the final cue I have for you is make sure you lock out at the very bottom. Bonus tip, if you can remember to add time under tension with these lads, they will absolutely enhance the growth. Cruising on from them bastards, we arrive at the single arm dumbbell row, an amazing unilateral movement, and in fact, a true classic here in the House of Gains. Before Dean even goes near the fucking weight, we want to establish a firm, solid base. And that simply means he has his foot out in a position whereby he can stabilize the movement, and on top of that as well, he has a comfortable position on the top of the bench with his hand. Not something with a bent arm or a flimsy fucking forearm hanging about the place. You want to make sure if I am to push him over or in the middle of his movement as he is going to failure, that stability is not a variable that we want to be considering within this movement. Once he's established his firm base, Dean, I want you to pick up the weight. Dean, I want you to do this incorrectly. This is something I see very commonly in the fact where Dean is going to pull vertically straight up from the starting position. And while this is a great exercise for other purposes such as a rear delt, this is not the primary objection of what we are here to target today. So Dean, what I want you to do is simply pull it vertically straight up to the ceiling. As you can see, this actually looks quite decent, but in fact, this is not the target muscle group that we're looking to achieve. Yes, we're hitting our back, yes, we're hitting our bicep, but we're also hitting this rear delt, which in this specific exercise is not a target focus. So we're gonna slightly rearrange this form, and instead of him pulling straight up, I want him to actually point his elbow back to me, and the dumbbell should end up in the pocket. As we can see here, we have a very similar movement, but in fact, if I just actually have a touch of that lat there, we can see peak engagement through the lat, 3, 2, 1 on the eccentric, and he's getting that full stretch throughout the lat and this movement. Just a quick one for you, if you did want to focus on the rear delt a little bit more, I would definitely advise from a more of a vertical row, but in most cases when we're trying to enhance the size of those lats, I want you to think about pulling the elbow back, hand ends up in the pocket, and the elbow points back to the other side of the room. A pro tip with this one is to make sure that you're using straps when performing a single arm dumbbell row. And I hear a lot of this muttering online about people saying, oh, but your forearms won't grow if you always use straps. Honest to God, at this very moment in time, I don't give a fuck about my forearms. All I'm focusing on is growing these big fucking lats of mine. Next up on the list is an exercise that needs no true explanation. It is an exercise that has stood the test of time and has been used by champions all around the globe to really enhance those back gains. And that, my friend, is the barbell row. Now, I've chosen this exercise specifically because of the hand position. If you revert back to our single arm dumbbell row, we had what we call a neutral grip position when it comes to our wrists. This allows us to go through a propinated grip, and slightly altering the wrist position allows us to target the back in a slightly different way than previous. When performing this exercise, what I see all the time is before they've even touched the weight, they end up trying to grab the bar with some fucking flumpy old back. And if an injury is going to occur, it is the laziness of which you start an exercise like this. So, Dean, if you don't mind, I want you to deadlift this safely to your stand position. As you can see, it's not a huge range of motion, but if it's something is going to go wrong and you're going to pick up the weight through a lazy means, that, my friend, is where the injury will happen. From here, Dean is going to hinge at the hip to a 45-degree angle, and he's going to fuse this position. And that simply just means everything is going to stay very static in the body except for his arms. From here, he's going to pull the bar actually up the legs into the belly button, and he's going to release for a 3, 2, 1, focusing on that time under tension as we've spoken about before. Thumbnail? Thumbnail. Fact, kid. Now, fuck off out my shot, man. I'm about to tell him about these isolations. Now we crack on with the isolations of the workout. Isolation exercises is a fancy term used to describe one moving joint, or in other words, one active muscle group at a time when performing an exercise. So for instance, a bicep curl, a shrug, and so on and so forth. And it is an excellent time to really focus in on how that muscle is working in its isolated state. I crack open my isolation work with a superset between the rear delt fly and the dumbbell shrug. And I try not to let my ego take over on these bad boys and go slightly lighter. And the reason I do so is to allow myself to focus on that mind-to-muscle connection. And I find that it drives growth a little bit more so when performing isolations in general. Now on to biceps. In my opinion, curls are simply curls. And you can't really go too far wrong with whatever curls that you choose. These are my curls of choice. But realistically, you can do any curl that you fancy yourself. The only tip that I give you when choosing curls is to try and manipulate and alter the wrist and elbow position from curl to curl. This is going to allow you to hit the target muscle in a slightly different manner than the previous exercise. Similar to how we did on the dumbbell and the barbell rows earlier on. And that concludes one of my all-time favorite pull workouts that you can actually bang out in 90% of all commercial gyms. And if you want this workout completely for free, drop us a line over on Instagram and I'll actually just send it over to you, no problem at all. Sound, good luck.